Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by Ellen Massell, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Now, there are so many different areas of development that create a well-experienced and a well-rounded child. One of the important types of development is the ability to socialize and empathize with others. Our guest today not only works with parents and children, but also teaches in finding best ways to support children in different settings. She is a developmental psychologist as well as an author, Dr. Dona Matthews. So thank you so much for joining me today, Donna.
Thank you, Dina. I'm happy to be here.
Now, as a developmental psychologist, what exactly is a little bit about your role in sort of supporting children, not only in the sense of social intelligence, but just creating that developmental skills that they would need?
I guess the role of a developmental psychologist generally is to typically work with kids whose parents or teachers or a child themselves have some concerns about what's going on in their life. So they're having trouble making friends or keeping friends, or they're having trouble with behavior or academic problems. Those are the areas that we typically work with.
And what got you wanting to do developmental psychology and sort of working with kids in such a direct aspect?
Yeah, I mean, my initial work, when I did my doctorate, was on intelligence. My field of expertise is giftedness. So, what is exceptionally advanced cognitive development? What does that look like? What are the components of it? How does it develop? And what can parents and teachers do to support that? So what can we do to help kids develop in the best possible ways? So that was my initial research area. And so as I worked in that field of gifted education and the development of giftedness more generally, I became more interested in the question of how can we use what we have learned sort of as a science about giftedness, how can we use that to support all kids more generally in developing their abilities in optimal ways? So that's where I've spent most of my career, and the books I've written most recently have moved away from giftedness per se to all children's development.
No, it's a really interesting area, especially talking about social intelligence. Because when you think about social intelligence, you do sort of go into the gifted
Oh
area in
yeah.
your mindset where you're like, okay, that means that you must be so high up there when it comes to your intelligence. When I think of intelligence as a kid, and especially growing up in the world today, there's a lot of sort of attachment to intelligence with being gifted rather than just the normal intelligence that's on a day-to-day basis.
Yep. Yeah, and certainly that was my initial work was really looking at what I called technically the domain specificity of giftedness. So I was very interested in social intelligence and academic intelligence, or the three domains I looked at initially were social, linguistic, and mathematical. And I was asking the question, exploring that question, to what extent does giftedness in one area, linguistic, social, or mathematical, connect with or to what extent is somebody who's gifted in one area, are they gifted in the other two areas? And so what I discovered is that they're quite separate. So somebody can be extremely well developed socially without having strong mathematical or linguistic skills. So each of those domains is somewhat separate and also quite connected. So as a general, there are two different misconceptions around these things. One is that somebody who is academically very gifted, especially mathematically gifted, is going to be a social nerd. They're going to have impoverished social skills. So that's one of the misconceptions out there. Another one, the opposite, is if you're linguistically gifted or mathematically gifted, you're automatically gifted socially and in sort of all areas. So gifted in all domains is one general misconception rather. So, I mean, I've heard teachers say to kids who are misbehaving or who are socially struggling, you're supposed to be gifted. You should figure this out. And it's so wrong, right? So anyways, it's I continue to find it all fascinating.
Yeah, no, I really do, especially the way that I think a lot of media is sort of putting, like film and TV, they're putting a lot of shows, sort of they have one gifted child, but they're socially inept or they're socially awkward. And you think that they're super smart, but they're socially awkward. But that's the one stereotype that sort of really fits in. When you think about it in real life, there's people that can be gifted linguistically, but also gifted socially
Totally.
and be average in math, for example.
Exactly. It's all over. So the sort of general conclusion that I've drawn about all this, and a lot of other people draw the same conclusion, is that every person is unique. We each have our own unique profile of abilities. So you can add musical giftedness into that. You can add physical, athletic giftedness into that. You know, there are many domains of expertise, and somebody might be high in one, low in another, medium in the others. It's all over the place. Every person is unique.
Yes, no, I agree. And I think there's so many different variations that you can be rather than the stereotypical variation and expectation as well, not only from parents, but teachers that are sort of set on them, which is it's always very interesting to talk about this, which is why I I get completely nerdy when this comes up because I think there's so many different conversations, so many different ways that this can go. And I want to thank you for that introduction in our topic today. But before we go all nerdy and get all deep down into it,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'd like to get to know some of your interests as well as some of the recommendations that you would have for our audience today by playing a little icebreaker game, sorry, to get us warmed up and ready to answer questions. So the first one is, do you have a favorite book?
I have so many favorite books. I love to read. And so my favorite book is often the book I'm reading right now. The book that is my sort of big favorite right now is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I don't know if you know that story, but I think it's absolutely brilliant. The story itself is terrific. The plot is great, and she is such a fine writer. It's beautifully well told. So Demon Copperhead sort of is, you can tell it's sort of based on or makes allusions to David Copperfield. So it's a modern
wow.
version of David Copperfield set in the sort of deep poverty of the Appalachian Mountains in southern United States. So it explores, it's got humor, it's got warmth, it's got tragedy, it's got big social issues, so intersection of poverty, big business, crime, power, addiction. I love it. So I'll stop. But
No,
I
I
think it's a terrific book.
I love that idea of just those books that really have everything in it and everything all in one place and so many different um so many different styles as well. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna look that up because that sounds totally
it's
up my alley.
brilliant.
Yeah, so
Oh,
I'm definitely adding that to things I'm looking up.
and one thing I should say in the context of the topic we're looking at today, it definitely explores the sort of the social intelligence domain. That's a big part of this, and the essential nature of having a network of social support that somebody can thrive even in the midst of terrible poverty and trauma if they have a strong network of social support. So,
That sounds really good. And I love how you sort of angled it into our topic today. That's amazing. Now,
well,
when it comes to movies, do you have a movie that you have recently enjoyed?
yeah, the movie that's sticking in my mind that I saw a few weeks ago is Maestro. Uh, it
Okay.
was Bradley Cooper. It was his concept. He developed it. He stars in it. It's about the life of Leonard Bernstein. So, a genius, an absolute musical genius who had this brilliant life. He was sort of tortured and very conflicted about his talent and about his sexuality. I found it a very sensitive, interesting movie. I strongly recommend it to people.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it before. It's amazing because you'd think that is it Bradley Cooper that directed it?
Yep, he directed it. He stars
Wow.
in it. I mean, he's a terrific actor. It's American.
Yeah.
Um, so and I saw it on television. I haven't yet, since COVID, been to a movie. I'm ready to start doing that, but I haven't yet done that.
Yes, no. You know, that it's a perfect time to start now, I think, with all the great movies that are coming out in cinemas this year as well. But no, that movie sounds
It is
really
terrific.
nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, when it comes to podcasts, do you have any podcasts that you could recommend to us?
There's one that you may or may not have heard of. It's Canadian. It's done here in Canada. Nella Ayed is a Canadian journalist who works with CBC Radio. So it's like BBC, and I think in Australia, ABC. Am I right? Is there a radio? I know there's a
Yes.
TV. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So our national radio is CBC Radio. And so Nella Ayed has a program called Ideas. And she explores these deep, thoughtful questions, and she explores all kinds of controversial topics like the lives of refugees and exiles, issues of climate change, social justice, indigenous realities, from all kinds of perspectives. She goes deep, she goes thoughtful. She herself was in a family of Palestinian refugees and lived for a time in a refugee camp in Jordan, which is obviously very timely. But her podcasts, they always leave me with, I think, better understandings of very complex topics. So I can't recommend this Ideas show too highly. It's great.
Oh, perfect. So is it Nella Ayat?
Yes, her first name is Nala,
Mhm.
Nahlah. Her last name is Ayed, Ayed. And
Okay.
I mean, if you look up Ideas, CBC Radio Ideas, you'll find it that way.
Okay, perfect. No, that sounds really good, especially in the world where we're in today with a lot of different conversations and different opinions. I think it's great to sort of have those recommendations out there where we can sort of expand on our knowledge and our understanding a bit more.
Yep,
Yeah, no,
I
that's
agree.
perfect. Thank you for
Yeah.
recommending that.
You're welcome.
Now, I know that when it comes to role models, everyone has either one person or group of people, either professionally or even personally. Do you have someone that you sort of look up to in either sense?
Yeah, I mean, because you asked me this question ahead of time, so I've been thinking about it.
Mhm.
And there are lots of different people that came to mind, but the one that stuck deepest and the one that I think is probably my best role model, if I have to have one, was my fifth grade teacher. Eleanor McRoberts was her name. And she was this woman. She was wise and kind, and she loved life. So she had an exuberance, sort of a quiet exuberance. And the thing that she did that I most admire is that she saw each of her students as precious. She saw each of her students as being special. And so she stays an inspiration to me, like decades later. She seemed to be like an authentic person, deeply caring. She saw me, valued me for what I was at my best. So I do my best to do that for others professionally and personally.
No, that sounds like an amazing. To remember the fifth grade teacher as well. I barely remember a lot of my teachers, but there's always that one teacher in school that has stood out, and that's amazing that um, it's sort of I can sort of see it being an inspiration to what you do now and being some kind of a hold a lot of
Yep,
value to what you do now.
yep, absolutely.
So during your academic pursuit, do you have a course that has really sort of inspired you even more to build on what you've learned and use that in your career?
Yeah, I mean, and this will seem strange, but when I think about that question, the course that comes to mind is town planning. Like I studied, that was my undergraduate degree was in urban planning,
Mhm.
which is only marginally connected to psychology, but it is very connected. I was inspired by people like Jane Jacobs, Lewis Mumford, or some of the people who were involved around the turn of the 20th century in thinking about, so they were reimagining the way people can live their lives and thinking about how cities and communities can be designed for optimal lifestyles. So to promote social interactions in the most uh, productive ways. So, how people can create rewarding lives for themselves in communities that support each member and benefit society as a whole.
No, that's such a strange connection, but you can sort of see how much it holds value as well when it comes to community building, when it comes to schools and the power that school holds. And no, I can definitely see the connection with that. When you first said it, I was a little bit worried. I was like, how is there a connection between town planning
Yeah.
and psychology? But I can definitely
Oh,
see it when
yeah.
you say it like that.
Totally. Totally. And in looking at all the research on people's social development and their holistic development, the importance, as I said earlier, of the network of social support and the way communities are designed can't be overstated. Those things matter in terms of how people do in their lives.
No,
So
that
it seems marginal, but it's actually seminal. It's important.
yeah, no, I'm surprised that no psychology course has ever sort of seen the
I know.
value in town planning and
Yeah,
city planning and community building, which I think is it definitely sort of changes the way that you think if you think it like that.
I know. It's good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for answering those little icebreaker questions, and I hope that you are all warmed up for answering a whole lot more when we talk about what we're talking about today.
Okay.
So I know that everyone has a very different definition as what parenting is, and the word parent as well. What would your definition of parenting be?
I mean, it's a good question. And as you say, every parent has to figure that out for themselves. Um, and it begins with sort of cultural values. So in some cultures, parents are expected to feed, clothe, house their child until the child can take care of themselves, until the child really can contribute to the family's survival, right? So that's like a foundation. We've moved into a stage in Australia, Canada, the United States, Western Europe, where a parent's role is way more comprehensive and includes supporting the child's social, emotional, cognitive development, in addition to their physical well-being, all the way into adulthood. So to begin with, I think we have to respect there are very many cultural attitudes to what parenting is. Speaking as a developmental psychologist, I think a good parent is one who is at peace with themselves, so they're able to love their child with all their heart, so they can be present to their child, provide the support the kid needs along the way that the child needs to create the best possible life for themselves. So for me, good parenting means respecting your child as a unique individual, loving them for who they are, not the child you wished you had, but the kid that you got, and then changing your approaches to your child as they grow and develop.
So you sort of see it as a mentor to sort of becoming a member of society.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So with that sort of definition, what kind of advice would you give to expectant parents who are wanting to go in that transition of parenting?
Well, I mean, everything I've written lately is all about that. So, I can give you 6 days of answers to it. But if I have to think of like a brief snippet, it would probably be the need for courage, which is something that expectant parents don't realize that that's going to be important. But in becoming a parent, you're embarking on the most important and the most compelling adventure of your life, in my opinion and my experience. How you navigate it is going to make a difference to you and to your child for the rest of your lives. So go in there with courage, love your child with all your heart, and take good care of yourself.
That's good. So sort of balancing being a parent and being a human at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Your child needs you to be, to the extent as possible, a happily functioning human. If you can do that and be patient and kind and loving with your child, it will go well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's such great advice, especially going into how a lot of people are sort of really worried about things very quickly when it comes to parenting. Seeing, especially when it comes to development as well, there's a lot that, okay, my child's not doing this at this age, when according to a certain book, they said they should be doing this at that age. So one of the parts of development that I think a lot of parents really struggle with is intelligence and the social development, especially if they're an only child or if they're going through so many different changing environments. So to start off with, what would your definition of social intelligence be?
And it is, again, it's a very comprehensive topic. For a short answer to that, I think I want to name the components. So, social intelligence is the ability to get along with others, to act wisely with others, and to form and maintain healthy relationships. Now, there are a lot of component skills. They include self awareness, social awareness, communication skills, very important, listening skills, empathy is very important, self regulation, patience, confidence, enthusiasm, conflict resolution ability, cooperation, self advocacy. These are all important components of social intelligence.
Mhm. It's so much. And we're talking about the worrisome of a lot of parents, especially when it comes to that aspect. So there's a lot for a parent to sort of look into when you sort of say list it like that. There's a lot of things that um, parents need to be sort of a little bit more aware of when it comes to the development in a social aspect.
Well, yes and no. I mean, if things aren't going well, if your child isn't thriving socially, then it's important to break it down and think component by component by component. If you yourself, as an adult, as a parent, have spent enough time on your own social development, then typically it comes sort of naturally. You foster the child's empathy, their ability to resolve conflicts. For some parents, it does not come naturally. They have never acquired the social skills themselves. And so then it is complicated because they have to learn those skills in order to help their child develop them. For most parents, it's not so complicated.
Yeah. So what skills, and I know when you say skills, there are a lot of skills that sort of need to be looked into, but what of the most important skills are sort of would need to be included to say that a child is socially intelligent?
Certainly empathy. Empathy is probably the foundation of all social ability. If you can feel what another person is feeling and care about that, you're going to be kind. You're going to become wise. People are going to like you. A lot of things follow from empathy. Self-awareness is another really important one. What else? I guess patience. If you can yourself as a parent be patient,
Yeah.
that's enormously important for the child, but it's also important for the child to develop patience, and kids learn what they experience from their family. So if you're patient, your child is going to learn that too.
So how do those skills contribute to a child's overall development?
Right. Social intelligence is critically important to every kind of success in life. So academics, career, finances, friendships, other relationships, happiness, contentment, pretty much every positive dimension of life is enabled by and enhanced by social intelligence.
So we've spoken about the factors of being socially intelligent, but going back to the beginning of sort of its development, what age does social intelligence typically begin to develop?
As with every form of intelligence, it begins to develop at birth with the infant's earliest interactions with their caregivers. And also, like other forms of intelligence, some children seem to come naturally to social strengths where others have a very hard time learning empathy, self-regulation, and the other components of social intelligence. So I've known babies who demonstrate elements of social intelligence, like responding with empathy when another baby cries, or acting spontaneously to soothe a person in distress. Other children take a lot longer to learn those basics. So their developmental trajectory is much slower. It happens later for them. We all know adults who still don't have social intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So psychologists have tried to map social development by age. So you can see, if you look this up, you can see different patterns. So by this age, your child should be doing this. By that age, that.
Okay.
But in reality, each kid is unique.
And I think that's what worries a lot of parents when they sort of see those charts and they see those graphs and they say, okay, the child should be speaking by this age, and the child is a little bit past that age and is still not developed that way yet. Is there a lot of pressure for parents to sort of have those, especially if they're going to start school later on, if they're going to go to kindergarten? Is that pressure sort of there for a lot of parents to sort of develop that before they start those primitive years?
Yes, and it's appropriate because if your child is going to go to school, you don't want them causing trouble in school. You want them succeeding. And in order to succeed, they're going to need some of the basics of social intelligence. So, yeah, it's definitely worth paying attention to all that stuff. At the same time, respecting your child's individuality. I mean, it's thinking about the context of the child. If they're overall thriving, doing well, happy, well adjusted, and their linguistic skills are behind what seems to be the average, or any other skill set, including social, it, it's okay. Like
Okay.
it will happen later with support and love and all the other things the child needs.
Mhm.
So it's important to pay attention to it on the one hand, and it's important to look at it in context of their life as a whole.
Because especially if a child is sort of a little bit quieter, a little bit introverted, because I know a lot of children sort of develop those introverted or extroverted traits at school ages and don't really want to walk up to a whole bunch of kids their age or don't want to. So there's not a lot that can be done with that if that's sort of their personality.
Yeah, and it's best to respect it as
Mhm.
who they are,
So
not
how do
try to
you
fix them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. So how do you sort of cultivate those kind of skills if the child is sort of a little bit socially anxious or um, sort of needing a little bit more of a push from parents?
Hmm. And the idea of a push from parents alarms me, because I
Mhm.
think when parents feel a need to push, then sometimes sort of damage can be done. The child can begin to think they're not okay just the way they are.
Okay.
So for me, it comes back to loving the child you've got, not the child you wish you had, and giving them the love and the support they need, giving them the opportunities to develop in whatever areas they want to develop,
Mhm.
being mindful as an adult that the social skills are going to matter, but not pushing your child to develop them. And if it becomes a problem for the child or a teacher, somebody says, this isn't developing as it should be. Um, Maybe your child is aggressive with other kids, doesn't know how to play properly,
Mhm.
doesn't know how to make friends. Then sometimes kids really do need help. Parents should then seek some professional help.
Okay. So there's a lot of different areas, and I think when we're talking about a well-developed, socially intelligent child, what are some of the specific benefits of being that kind of well-developed child?
Kids with well developed social intelligence are better liked. People like spending time with people who know how to behave with others, are empathetic, and so on. So when you are well liked by others and you like others too, there are a lot more opportunities in your life for productive interactions and experiences. You have a greater sense of well being in every dimension of life: academic, athletic, personal, creative. Um, Research on musical talent, for one example, shows that as a child develops their musical skills at a higher and higher level, their social skills come to matter more and more in terms of the opportunities they're going to get to perform and to achieve success.
Mhm.
So, in general, people who have sort of lower social intelligence, who other people find annoying or hard to work with, they're not asked back. They're not hired. They're first fired. They're not highly recommended as, oh, you've got to hire this person. So, well developed social intelligence takes you a long way in life.
I think there's a huge, especially when you talk about being an adult in a social and being sort of that well developed, having those well developed skills. In this day and age, there's so many different ways of working that are sort of equipped for handling the socially awkward or the more introverted people, especially the working from home bit. but you sort of don't want to fall into that thing, I guess, of like not interacting with people constantly or not interacting with. So when it comes to a lot of the different social skills that are sort of needed to be well developed, what are some of the misconceptions that can sort of be understood? And I think you've listed some of them throughout the show, but what are some of the other misconceptions that sort of come about surrounding the concept of a child being socially intelligent?
Okay, so one of the components of social intelligence is confidence, confidence in social settings. And one of the misconceptions that I run into a lot is that praising children supports their confidence. So
Okay.
parents think that, they say, "Oh, Johnny, you're so good at this," that it makes the kid feel better. It feels more confident. But it's the opposite. Praise can actually undermine the child's confidence. If the kid feels the praise is unearned, what they feel is, "Oh, my parent," or whoever it is, "thinks I'm so needy that they need to praise me." It makes the kid worry about themselves. Or if praise is for something trivial, it makes the kid feel, well, there's nothing that's really important that's good about me.
Mhm.
So it's best when parents and others praise kids for their curiosity, for their effort, not for their ability, not for their looks. It's tell them how proud you are of their persistence in learning to read, for example, which is in their control, right? Persistence is something a child chooses to be.
Mhm.
Don't tell them they're smart. Don't tell them they're gifted, because that feels fixed and out of their control. It's mysterious. They don't know what that means, but they can see that they've stayed with something or explored their curiosity.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
so, um, sort of a corollary of that is it's wise to avoid labeling your child, even with positive labels like gifted or beautiful, because those kinds of things encourage self consciousness. It can discourage your kid from following their interests as freely and fully as they otherwise might.
Mm. So I guess when it comes to praises as well, it sort of sets that expectation in the child's eye saying, okay, because I'm talking to a lot of people, because I get along with a lot of people, and you praise me for that, then if I'm not feeling like I want to talk to people, then you're not going to say anything, or you don't really like that part where I don't feel like spending a day surrounded by a group of people that I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, that's
Yep.
really interesting, especially things that they don't, especially when you're talking about the connection to mental health and balancing their own. I think overpraising is a thing parents do very easily, especially especially when it comes to things that they have no control over, like you said, being gifted or these little things. But there's so much that when it comes to praising, and I think praising is something that parents, like I said, parents do often, what types of things, for example, you say curiosity, what types of curiosity should they be praised for?
Well, so if a child you're taking a walk down the street with your child, and there's some workmen doing work on the street. They're
Mhm,
digging, and you've got this little kid, and they're really into it, and they're saying, "What is this? Why is that?" Etc. Etc.
mhm.
Um, you can say something like, "I love it when you observe the world and are interested in it and ask me questions about it." So it's
Okay.
something within the child's control. You're praising something innate to the child. So you're it's spontaneous, it's free. It doesn't change the way the child perceives themselves. It doesn't give them something to lose, which is the problem when you say you're gifted, because then they become afraid to ask questions because it might make them look not so gifted. So,
Okay. Okay, no, that makes a whole lot of sense. I think there's a lot of expectation that sort of come on with the child that sort of sees the parents praising that and sort of see it as okay,
Yes, you're
that's
right.
how they're going to be. That's how I need to be all the time.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That if a child is seen to be the smart one in the family, or
Mhm.
the beautiful one, or the artistic one, it creates limits. The child feels a need to be that person, and if they're not that person, who are they?
Mhm.
So it limits the child ultimately rather than expanding. Because I think as a parent, the best thing to do is expand the areas of possibility.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when it comes to the idea of going beyond intelligence, could you provide us with a little bit of an overview as to what going beyond intelligence would mean?
Yes, sure. Because one of my books is called Beyond Intelligence, and my blog with Psychology Today is called Going Beyond Intelligence. And what I'm trying to say with that is there's so many factors other than the cognitive skills or academic smarts that go into living a successful life. Social intelligence is perhaps the most important of these, certainly one of the most important. So connected with that are things like perseverance, courage, optimism, integrity, gratitude, all dimensions of social intelligence that go beyond the academic or cognitive areas that most people think of when they think of intelligence.
Okay.
So, so I'm not saying that intellectual ability doesn't matter, because it does, but just that it matters most and best when it's working in the context of a healthy mind, spirit, body.
So, how does that challenge a lot of the other traditional views that sort of the idea of being intelligent or intelligence is?
Right. And it does. You're right to ask that question. So my expertise is gifted education. So addressing questions like what is intelligence? How does intelligence develop? And as I explored these questions, I came to see that cognitive strengths, things like a great vocabulary, a facility with abstract reasoning, stuff like that, those strengths are most useful when they're applied in the context of other strengths, very much including self awareness and social skills. So, intelligence alone doesn't lead to happiness or success. So, my strong advice to parents and educators who want to support their kids' optimal development, go beyond intelligence.
Okay. So, it's sort of like look beyond what those sort of traditional intelligent views would be. So, the skills that you mentioned a little bit earlier as well, maybe looking beyond that and try to find other things that your child can sort of really be really be accepted in, or really be wanting to do, rather than just saying, okay, you fit into this bubble, you fit into this stream. Okay. No, that's really interesting, because I really wish that we had that when I was growing up, sort of that idea of not fitting into one stream. Either you're creative or you're intelligent. There's two completely different areas that you would go in. And it's so strange, because when you think about growing up, there's the idea, okay, because I'm not great at math, then I can't go into anything that has math in it. I can't go in anything that has statistics in it, because I can't do statistics in school. So then I always stuck with things that are a little bit more creative, but I love the idea of research. So there was like a middle ground in between it as well for me, that I found myself really fitting in. And I really wish that we had that idea of, okay, there's something in the middle that you can go in, where it does teach you to balance. Because especially the ways I guess schools are set as well, they're sort of set to differentiate between art, between being artistic and being intelligent in math, and sticking with math and science and all those other streams.
Mhm. Which is terribly limiting,
Yes.
for the kids who are great at math and for the kids who are terrible at math. We should
Yes.
encourage all abilities in all kids, encourage their curiosity, help them develop their areas of interest.
Yes, no, I agree, especially because I went to a high school this before I moved, before I changed schools at that time. And that school decided to put all the students that got A's in one class, or the student that got B's in another class, student that got C's in another class, and C's and D's in one class, and A's and B's in one class. And it's just the amount of stress that I got, because I was definitely a C student back in high school. So, but I knew that I could do better if I had that idea that I could do better. And that was such a limiting experience, which is why I changed schools at that point, because I realized that there was no way that I could do better if I was stuck in with students who did the same level I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And that also, your story illustrates the fact that everybody develops at their own pace. So they set you into these classes on the basis of your grades at a certain point in time. Now, you might have been having an off year. Somebody else might have been having a really good year. And then it's sort of set in stone for several years afterwards that these children are brighter than these children. And it's such a disservice to both groups, because people develop different areas at different times.
Yes, no, I agree. And I think, especially when in school as well, you don't really see anything beyond high school. You don't see anything beyond middle school because you're so focused on the social aspect usually. And I think a lot of kids are. I was focused on the social aspect in school, but they don't really seem to show you anything outside of that, or any idea outside of you just sitting down and studying. So when it comes to creating that supportive and nurturing environment that we have spoken about a little bit before, how can parents sort of promote that kind of environment that really encourages the growth of social intelligence, but also that emotional understanding?
Right. I mean, I think that the research is very strongly supporting the idea of play. Play is one of the most important vehicles for developing children's social intelligence, as well as many other abilities. It stimulates language development, which is an essential cornerstone of all intelligences, including social and academic. Through play, kids try out new vocabulary, develop their communication skills, get physically stronger. It's how they learn to interact happily and productively with others, how to share, how to negotiate, how to resolve conflicts, how to advocate for themselves. All those are essential components of social intelligence. So if there's one thing, and I can go on and on about play, there's a lot of research showing the importance of it and the ways it helps kids develop social intelligence in the context of doing things that matter to the child.
So, play dates, for example, sort of like having other children around in an environment that your child feels comfortable. Is that something that you would recommend for a child, say, for example, who is a little bit more socially awkward, a little bit more introverted, and just having like one or two other friends from kindergarten, for example, over, and just sort of having that environment?
Yeah. I mean, I'm concerned about play dates.
Okay.
I think, yes, if you have a child who's sort of having any issues around friendship making or friendship keeping, then yes, you probably do have to get involved with play dates. My concern with play dates is that they can lose the spontaneity. So for play to be most beneficial, it's situations where they develop organically and spontaneously. So children go to the neighborhood park and they play. They invent their own games. They interact with a variety of other kids. They haven't organized it ahead of time. There's sort of minimal supervision only for the sake of safety. So it's not organized by the parents. Now, in some circumstances, that kind of thing, sort of the neighborhood playground, it doesn't exist or it's not safe. And in those circumstances, parents do need to be mindful of how can they create environments where their children can play. But so I'm nervous about the notion of play dates. It sounds too organized for what I'm thinking of. Sort of the spontaneity, sort of outdoor play is really important. And the more outdoor play a child has, the better physically, intellectually, creatively, socially. It's just better. Kids are freer outdoors, um, depending on the environment. And so sometimes with a play date, the parents want to get too involved and they sort of help organize the time. And I think then the benefits of play, you'll still get some, but diminished.
Okay, so it's maybe to balance both the at-home play and going out play is probably something that you would recommend.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I love and disliked play dates, I think, growing up, because a lot of it was, okay, that was my home was my safe space. Home was my place, because I grew up with one sibling. So I had a younger sister that I always still played with. But I think coming home was like, okay, coming home was a little bit more quiet. Coming home was a place where I could play individually with my sister or play with my mom and play with people that I knew really well. So when I always play dates, I think I would always be like, can we go to a park? Can we go somewhere else? Can we go meet at like the indoor playgrounds and things like that? Because it was so much more of a space that I got to do other things with rather than people. I think I was also possessive with my toys at home as well. So that's probably why. But yeah, I think, and I remember a lot of the time just being like, okay, I like indoor playgrounds rather than outdoor playgrounds. And so is it important to sort of recognize the
Yes,
difference, the things that the child feels more comfortable with?
totally. And totally. And your story is lovely, where it sounds like your parents sort of respected your needs and your personality. And yes, I mean, you made a very important point that while social play with other children is very important, so is alone time when you can just play by yourself with your dolls or your Lego set or whatever it is you want to play with, your alone time, creativity stuff on your own. Those things are all great. And respecting a child's need. Some children need a lot more social time than others. Some kids need a lot more quiet time than others. So it sounds like your parents respected that, and that's great.
Yes, no, that was a really great part of my childhood. I think remembering, I think before school was probably one of the best parts of my childhood. Now, this moves on perfectly with the next section of our show, which is the practice and habits, sort of something that you do yourself or have done yourself. Now, not only are you a parent of 4 children, but you're also a grandparent of 7 children. With this change in roles, what is a practice that you do to sort of encourage your grandkids, or even that you used to do with your kids, in their sort of social intelligence?
Hmm. I mean, it's variable. Like it depends on the child, right?
Mhm.
So just as you know, we talked a little bit about your situation and sort of what you did around play. I think it's really important as a parent, as a grandparent, to respect each child's individual needs and their social strengths and their social weaknesses. And so I do a lot of listening. I do a lot of observing of where the child's interests and strengths are and what they need to do some more work on. And so, I mean, one of the things I do, I think automatically, when a child is kind, sort of overtly kind to another, I always celebrate it. It always makes me happy. And I always say, you know, I'm so glad to see you helping this other child. That's great. Like, so I pay attention to the strengths. And I think in every domain, And I do everything I can to help the child recognize their own strengths so they can build on that. And so for a child who's more shy, I always give them lots of space. I never insist on a hug or, it's sort of I wait until the child is ready for a playful interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that some children love lots of play and lots of conversation and lots of interaction, and I'm happy to engage in that. But I'm also happy to respect a need for quiet or time or space.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of boundary understanding and observation that sort of sits in place.
That's very well said. Yes. Yes.
So when it comes to that, what are three good things that sort of come about when sort of looking at that observations?
Okay. Three good things that happen for the children. Is that what you mean?
It could be for you, some of three good things that you sort of noticed about you doing that observation.
Okay. It's an interesting question. So I feel more connected to children or people if I take some time to pay attention to who they are and what they like doing and how they like doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice for me to feel that sense of connection.
Okay.
I think another benefit is that the child or adult, the other person, feels respected because I've been paying attention to who they are and trying to accommodate that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, sort of going back to the question you asked earlier about my mentor, so my Miss McRoberts, my grade 5 teacher,
Mm-hmm.
I think she made me feel valued because she saw me as an individual. So I hope that that's another strength of paying attention, observing what's going on with kids. So I value them for their uniqueness, and I think that helps them do the same thing.
That's such a great way, especially with the idea of 7 grandkids, 7 completely different personalities. There's that need of everyone feeling individually respected and individually cared for rather than saying, okay, a whole lump sum, I'm being compared to my sister or I'm being compared to my sibling. So that's such a great approach to everyone feeling valued, everyone feeling like they can be themselves.
I try for that. That's my objective.
It sounds like you're doing a really good job of that. So I commend that.
Thank you.
So how do you think that this practice has impacted your relationship with your grandkids, but also how you sort of see the world and how you sort of see the practice entirely?
Huh. Okay. How has it impacted? Well, I think it sets a stage for a strong relationship with the various grandkids, and some of them more than others. And I think that's inevitable. So, um, so it does sort of creates a foundation for meaningful connection,
Yeah.
which I think is valuable for me and for them. It's a really important part of my life.
Yeah.
So there's that. And sorry, there was a second part to your question. I forget.
How it's sort of impacted your perception about life.
Wow. I guess I'm incredibly enriched by these relationships I have and am developing with each of these young people.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes a much richer, fuller life than I would otherwise be having.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, no, I love
feel
that
very
answer.
blessed.
I love that
Yeah.
answer. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. This ties in well with the last section of our show, which is the open mic. Now, this gives you a chance to share anything that you are passionate about or something that you may want to share with our audience, something you may want to promote as well. So in the last minute or so, I'd love to give you the floor and share what's on your mind for today.
Okay. I mean, there's so many things that come to mind with this open question. Um, I'm I'm moving into the next phase of my career. I'm beginning to. I've always wanted to write fiction, and I've always dabbled at doing that. But I'm moving now into doing more of that. I'm moving towards seeing myself as a novelist rather than as a psychologist. And, I'll always be a psychologist, so I'll always have that in the background. Um, but I'm at a stage in my life where I have the freedom and flexibility to do what I really want to do. And I sort of affirmed that that's my next direction.
Oh,
So,
wow.
simultaneously, I feel like, and it's sort of part of that moving to writing, fiction writing. But my most recent book, I'll get a copy of it. This imperfect parenting,
Okay.
and the subtitle, "How to Build a Relationship with Your Child to Weather Any Storm." Now, it's built on all the work I've done for all the decades of my work as a psychologist, where it's really down to good parenting leading to good outcomes for kids is all about a parent's relationship with their child. And that sounds simplistic, but in this book, I pulled together, I think this is why I feel I'm ready to move on. I think I've put together everything I've learned about kids and parents in this book. So
No, that sounds, I can't wait to see your name on attached to fiction. I think that's such a great transition as well. Do you know what type of fiction you want to go into?
yeah, I definitely do. It's sort of in the literary fiction area, but also I'm very drawn to murder mysteries. So it will have that.
Wow, I love that. No, so the next Agatha Christie, probably.
Well, we'll see.
No, that sounds amazing, and I can't wait to sort of see that journey. Yeah, and sort of hopefully see that progress as well. That sounds like it's such an interesting new phase and new area that you want to go in.
Thank you.
So we're coming up to the end of the show, and I know that a lot of people, if they're wanting to find out a little bit more about you, is there a place that they're able to go to?
Yes, my website is donamatthews.com. So my name is Donna with one N, Matthews with two T's. So donamatthews.com.
Okay, that's perfect. No, thank you so much for sharing. And I'll definitely have that down in the link below. And that has a list of the books that you have out as well.
Yep, it does.
Perfect. So definitely go and check that out if you want to go and see some of Donna's books. And definitely go check out Imperfect Parent as well if you want to go and have a look at that. It's definitely a how-to guide, as by the sounds of it. So I'm excited to sort of see that. Thank you so much, Donna, for joining me on the show today. It was amazing talking about this and learning a lot more about social intelligence and how we can be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to building the social expectations.
Yep. So I've enjoyed it.
Well, I hope you guys learned as much as I did when it comes to this, and I'll see you all in the next episode. You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant. Thanks for tuning in.